Okay, settle in because this is a story I never thought I'd tell. My name is Dr. Emily Carter Langley, and for years I was the quiet engine behind one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, Langley Innovations. My research, my patents, my lifeblood fueled its rise. They thought I was just the lab coat easily discarded. They thought wrong. I just discovered the real reason why my own mother-in-law, the formidable Carter Langley, CEO of the company that bore our family name and my innovations, looked me in the eye one Tuesday morning and shattered my world. It wasn't about business acumen or IPO readiness, as she so smoothly claimed. Oh no, the truth was far uglier, a tangled web of ambition, betrayal, and a breathtaking underestimation of the woman she'd just tried to erase. That day, I had no idea that one conversation, that single, brutal boardroom execution, would unravel multiple truths. Truths that had been hidden for years, simmering beneath a veneer of familial and corporate propriety. There's a particular kind of chill that settles in your bones when someone you've shared holiday dinners with, someone whose son you love, calmly informs you that your life's work is being handed to a stranger, a younger, shinier model with an MBA, and apparently the killer instinct I, the mere scientist, lacked. I remember the gloss of the mahogany table reflecting Catherine's perfectly composed face, the way my own hands trembled slightly as I clutched a pen, the silence from my husband Andrew beside me, a silence more deafening than any explosion. It was a moment of profound personal vulnerability, a stripping away of not just a job, but an identity I thought was secure. They thought I was a scientist absorbed in my research, oblivious to the Machiavellian games played in the C-suite. They were right about the first part. I lived for the science. But they were catastrophically wrong about the second. Little did they know the same mind that could decode complex molecular structures could also see patterns in human behavior, especially when driven by greed. If you've ever poured your heart and soul into something only to have it ripped away or devalued by those you trusted, if you've ever felt unseen or unheard in a place you considered home, then comment and subscribe. Because this story, it's for you. Trust me, if you're someone who believes in fighting for what's yours, if you believe that intellect and integrity can still win against ruthless ambition, this story will change how you see family business and the quiet power of holding your ground forever. What they didn't know was that while I was building their empire, I was also very carefully building my fortress. And they had just declared war. To understand the earthquake that was my firing, you need to understand the fault lines that had been forming for years deep beneath the surface of the Langley dynasty. I wasn't born a Langley, I married into it. My name is Emily Carter, or Dr. Emily Carter Langley, as I became professionally. Science was my first love, a burning curiosity that started with a chemistry set in my childhood garage in a quiet, leafy suburb far removed from the glittering high-rises of Atlanta, where Langley Innovations would eventually make its home. My parents, a history professor and a librarian, fostered a love of knowledge, not power. They taught me the value of diligence, of quiet contribution, of letting your work speak for itself. It was a philosophy that would serve me well in the lab, but as I'd painfully learn, could be a profound liability in a corporate world orchestrated by someone like Carter Langley. I met Andrew Langley during my doctoral studies. He was charming, intelligent, pursuing his MBA, and seemed genuinely fascinated by my passion for biochemical engineering. He spoke of his mother, Catherine, with a mixture of awe and slight trepidation. She was even then a force of nature in the Atlanta business scene, having built a modest consulting firm into a significant player. When Andrew first introduced us, Catherine was polished, impeccably dressed, her eyes sharp and appraising. She smiled a quick professional baring of teeth and welcomed me with a cool courtesy that I, in my naivety, mistook for warmth. A scientist, she'd mused her tone unreadable. How novel. Langley Innovations began almost by accident, or so it seemed at the time. My postdoctoral research focused on bioadaptive materials, polymers that could respond to and interact with biological systems in unprecedented ways. It was groundbreaking, with potential applications in everything from targeted drug delivery to advanced prosthetics. Andrew, by then my husband, and armed with his freshly minted MBA, saw the commercial potential. Catherine, ever the opportunist, saw a new empire to build. "Emily, darling, your work is interesting," Catherine had said one evening at their sprawling Buckhead estate, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet. "But research is one thing, business is another. Andrew can help you make something of it. We can." And so Langley Innovations was born. My lab, initially a small rented space in Midtown, became the R&D heart of the company. My patents, one after another, formed the bedrock of our product pipeline. I was named Head of Research and Development, a title that sounded impressive, but in Catherine's world implicitly meant, "Stay in your lab, dear, and let the adults handle the money." The family dynamics were complex, a carefully choreographed dance, where Catherine was the undisputed lead. She was a matriarch in the truest, most formidable sense. Her approval was the sun around which her son Andrew orbited. He was a good man, I believed kind-hearted underneath a layer of ambition cultivated by his mother. But he was also her son, groomed to inherit, conditioned to please her. The favoritism, or rather the differing sets of expectations, became apparent early on. When my first major patent was granted, the one that truly launched Langley Innovations, Catherine hosted a dinner. She toasted Andrew's foresight in recognizing the commercial viability and the company's brilliant strategy. My name was mentioned as our lead scientist, almost an afterthought. Andrew, to his credit, looked uncomfortable and tried to redirect praise to me, but Catherine skillfully steered the conversation back to market penetration and investor confidence. I felt a small cold knot in my stomach, but dismissed it as Catherine simply being business-focused. Andrew would present a 5-slide PowerPoint on market trends, often compiled from industry reports, and Catherine would laud his sharp business instincts and strategic mind. I, on the other hand, would present months of complex research data and breakthroughs, and Catherine's response would invariably be, "Excellent work in the lab, Emily. Now, how does Andrew plan to monetize this?" My scientific achievements were always framed as raw material for Andrew and Catherine to mold into profit. The implication was clear: his work was valuable. Mine was a resource. When Langley Innovations moved into its gleaming new Peachtree Street headquarters, Catherine personally designed the executive floor. Her office was palatial Andrew's, nearly as grand with a view. My office, despite being head of R&D, was tucked away near the lab's, functional but stark. "You scientists prefer to be close to your experiments, don't you, dear?" she'd said with that thin smile. Less distraction from the messy bits. Whenever there was a positive press piece, Catherine would ensure Andrew was quoted, positioned as the visionary strategist. My contributions, if mentioned, were usually in a collective, our brilliant research team. She was crafting a narrative, and I was not its protagonist. I recall one specific instance where a local business journal wanted to do a feature on the brains behind the innovation. Catherine smoothly redirected them to Andrew, suggesting a piece on the dynamic mother-son duo leading Langley Innovations into the future. Andrew's department strategy and business development always had its budget requests approved without question, often for lavish marketing campaigns or speculative ventures. My R&D budget requests, crucial for new equipment or hiring specialized talent, were often met with intense scrutiny, demands for immediate ROI justification, and subtle suggestions that perhaps I wasn't being fiscally responsible. "Emily, we need tangible results, not just interesting experiments," Catherine would say, conveniently forgetting that those interesting experiments were the company's entire foundation. Catherine Langley was a woman of contradictions, fiercely intelligent, yet dismissive of intellectual pursuits that didn't directly translate to profit. She could be charming when it suited her, but her default setting was a kind of regal disdain for anyone she didn't consider her equal in ambition or ruthlessness. She was tall, always impeccably tailored, her silver hair styled in a severe but elegant coif. Her eyes, a pale penetrating blue, missed nothing. She valued loyalty, but only if it flowed upwards to her. Andrew, my husband, was caught in the middle, or so I told myself. He had his mother's ambition, but I thought a softer core. He was handsome, with Catherine's sharp features, but a warmer expression, at least when he wasn't in his mother's shadow. He genuinely loved me, I believed. He admired my intellect, my dedication. But he was also terrified of disappointing Catherine, of failing to live up to her towering expectations. This fear often translated into passivity, an unwillingness to challenge her even when he knew she was wrong. My early signs of potential had always been in the scientific realm. I won science fairs, excelled in advanced placement classes, published my first paper as an undergraduate. My parents celebrated these achievements quietly proud but never ostentatious. In the Langley world, however, these were curiosities, not markers of true power. Power was control, influence, money, the things Catherine understood, the things she was determined to accumulate. And I, with my head in the lab, was in her eyes a valuable asset, but ultimately a tool, not a player. This fundamental misunderstanding would become her undoing. The emotional foundation was being laid not just for my connection with an audience who might feel similarly overlooked, but for the righteous anger that would eventually fuel my fight. I was becoming increasingly frustrated, yes, but also unknowingly stronger. The years at Langley Innovations became a slow, steady rhythm of groundbreaking work from my end and a consistent pattern of my contributions being subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, minimized or repackaged by Catherine. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, each dismissal, each overlooked achievement, another layer of scar tissue forming over my initial enthusiasm. There were multiple milestone moments. When we secured our first major institutional investment, it was based almost entirely on a presentation I gave to the investors detailing the science behind our flagship product line, a revolutionary bioconductive gel for neural interfaces. I spent weeks translating complex science into understandable, compelling terms. The investors were visibly impressed. Yet at the celebratory dinner Catherine threw, the narrative shifted. Andrew's astute financial modeling and Catherine's compelling vision for market disruption sealed the deal. Proclaimed the internal company newsletter. I received a polite nod for technical support. The resentment began to build a slow burn in my chest. My academic and career achievements outside the direct purview of Langley Innovations were similarly dismissed. I was invited to guest lecture at my alma mater, a prestigious university. When I mentioned it to Catherine, hoping for a flicker of acknowledgement, she merely raised an eyebrow. "Charming, Emily. Just ensure it doesn't distract from your Q3 deliverables. We have an IPO to think about, you know." Her focus was relentless, her vision tunneled on the prize of public offering, and anything outside that narrow beam was irrelevant. Meanwhile, Andrew's efforts, often more about presentation than substance, were consistently lauded. I remember one specific instance. He'd spent a month working with a high-priced consulting firm to develop a new brand identity for the company. The result was a slightly altered logo and a new tagline, "Innovating the Future of Life." Catherine threw a lavish internal launch party praising Andrew's bold reimagining of the Langley brand and his innate understanding of market psychology. He'd essentially outsourced the work and put his name on the cover, yet he was the hero. I, who had just perfected a complex synthesis process that cut our production costs by 30%, received a brief email, "Good. Keep R&D focused on efficiency." My internal monologue during these years was a tumultuous sea of frustration, self-doubt, and a growing, weary anger. Am I invisible? Does my work only matter when it pads the bottom line they control? Why doesn't Andrew see this more clearly? Or if he does, why doesn't he speak up more forcefully? I loved him, but his conditioned deference to his mother was a constant source of pain. I try to rationalize it. She's his mother. He's trying to keep the peace. The work itself is what matters. But the excuses wore thin over time. One particularly telling dialogue scene occurred about 2 years before my firing. We were in Catherine's office, she, Andrew, and I, discussing the budget for the next fiscal year. "Emily, your request for the new spectrometry unit is substantial." Catherine set her pen, tapping lightly on the glossy proposal I'd submitted. Are we entirely sure this expenditure is justified right now? Andrew has an excellent proposal for expanding our European marketing presence, and resources are finite. Catherine, I began, trying to keep my voice even. The current spectrometer is outdated. To stay ahead to develop the next generation of products you're basing the IPO projections on, we need this equipment. It will accelerate discovery, improve quality control. Yes, the science is always fascinating, she interrupted, a dismissive wave of her hand. Andrew, your projections for the European market. Andrew, looking slightly pained, but unwilling to directly contradict her, launched into his presentation. With a targeted campaign, we project a 15% market share increase within 2 years. Excellent, Catherine beamed. That's the kind of forward-thinking, revenue-generating strategy we need to highlight for investors. Later that evening, I tried to talk to Andrew. Don't you see what happened in there, Andrew? The spectrometer isn't just fascinating science, it's the engine of this company. Your marketing campaign will have nothing to market if R&D stalls. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know your work is crucial, Em, but Mom, she thinks in terms of immediate, visible returns. The IPO is her everything right now. The spectrometer is a big upfront cost. I'll try to talk to her again, smooth things over. He never did, or if he did, it had no effect. We limped along with the old equipment for another year, a constant source of frustration for my team. The pattern was set. My needs, R&D's needs, were secondary to Catherine's grand vision of IPO glory, a vision in which Andrew was her co-star and I, the brilliant but inconveniently expensive, supporting act. It wasn't all bleak. I had allies, though few, within the Langley inner circle. My primary confidant and a crucial supporting character was Marcus Harrison, an intellectual property lawyer I'd known since my university days. He was sharp, pragmatic, and fiercely protective of innovators. I'd consulted him early on when Langley Innovations was first forming to ensure my initial patents were properly filed in my name. It was a decision born more out of good practice than any specific distrust at the time, but it would prove to be monumental. Never assign your core IP without understanding exactly what you're giving away, Emily, he'd advised. Especially not to family, ironically enough. That's when things get messiest. Over the years, as Langley Innovations grew, Catherine had made several attempts to have me sign over all patent rights to the company. It's just a formality, darling, cleaner for the corporate structure, she'd purr each time I'd found a reason to delay a clause to query always with Marcus's quiet counsel in the background. I'd tell myself it was just due diligence. Deep down, a seed of self-preservation was taking root. My team in R&D were also incredibly loyal. They were brilliant scientists and engineers who saw firsthand the magic we were creating, and they respected me immensely. They often chafed under the budgetary constraints and the perceived lack of understanding from the executive suite, but their dedication to the work, and to me, was unwavering. The most recent major disappointment, the one that set the stage for the final storm, came about 6 months before my dismissal. We had a breakthrough. A new biomaterial with self-repairing properties, a potential game-changer for medical implants. It was the culmination of years of work. I presented it to Catherine and Andrew, my voice vibrating with excitement. Catherine listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she paused, then said, "Impressive, Emily. Very technical. Andrew, can you work with Victoria to package this for the pre-IPO roadshow? We need to highlight an exciting pipeline." Victoria Hastings. The name landed like a stone in the pit of my stomach. Victoria was Catherine's latest protege, a young, ruthlessly ambitious MBA with a talent for corporate speak and a barely concealed disdain for anyone without a strategic financial mindset. Catherine had hired her as a special projects lead, but it was clear she was being groomed for something more. To have Victoria package my breakthrough as if it were a new brand of cereal was a profound insult. "Catherine," I said, my voice tighter than I intended, "I can present the science. I understand its implications better than anyone." "Of course you do, dear," she said, that patronizing smile firmly in place. But Victoria understands how to speak to investors. It's a different language. We need to ensure the message is streamlined. Andrew said nothing, just looked down at his notes. That night, the silence in our home was heavy. The resentment I felt was no longer a slow burn. It was a simmering volcano. I knew with a chilling certainty that something had to give. I just didn't realize how soon or how catastrophically it would happen. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of Catherine's plan to oust me entirely. The 6 months leading up to that fateful Tuesday were a masterclass in psychological warfare, orchestrated by Catherine with chilling precision. The waves of escalating conflict rolled in one after another, each one eroding my position, my confidence, and my rapidly dwindling hope that things might somehow right themselves. Victoria became a constant presence. She was inserted into R&D strategy meetings, her questions always geared towards marketability and scalability rather than scientific merit. She'd echo Catherine's points, often using the same corporate jargon. We need to ensure R&D is fully aligned with our Q4 IPO trajectory, Dr. Langley. She'd say, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. She was young, barely 30, impeccably dressed in power suits that looked like they cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless. She was the physical embodiment of Catherine's vision for the company's future leadership, slick, business-focused, and utterly devoid of the messy passion that fueled genuine innovation. My team bristled at her interference, but Catherine made it clear Victoria spoke with her authority. My R&D budget, already tight, was suddenly subjected to even more intense scrutiny. Projects I deemed critical were labeled non-essential or deferred pending IPO. Meanwhile, funding was poured into marketing, into glossy brochures featuring Andrew and increasingly Victoria as the faces of Langley Innovations. I found myself fighting for basic resources for the very tools my team needed to do their jobs. It felt like a deliberate strangulation of the department that was ironically the company's lifeblood. During one particularly heated budget meeting, Catherine said, "Emily, your department's burn rate is concerning. We need to see more commercially viable outputs faster. Perhaps Victoria can help you streamline your processes." The implication was clear. I was inefficient, a drain. Catherine began systematically excluding me from key strategic discussions. Meetings I would have previously led or been integral to were suddenly happening without my knowledge. Decisions about product roadmaps heavily reliant on my research were being made by Catherine, Andrew, and Victoria. When I questioned this, Catherine's response was always smooth, dismissive. "Just an initial strategy session, Emily. We'll loop you in when we need the technical deep dive." I was being sidelined, pushed to the periphery of my own domain. The loneliness of this was profound. Even Andrew seemed more distant, buried in IPO preparations and increasingly echoing his mother's talking points. One evening, I confronted him. "Andrew, what is going on? I'm being shut out. Victoria is practically running R&D by proxy. Don't you see this?" He looked stressed, defensive. It's just the pressure of the IPO. Mom wants everything to be perfect, presented in the right way. Victoria is good at that. It's not about you personally." "Not about me." I felt a surge of cold anger. My entire life's work is this company. My name is on the patents that are its foundation. How can it not be about me? "You're being emotional." He said a phrase that was like a red flag to a bull. "We all need to focus on the common goal." My common goal was innovation, Andrew. I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "What's yours? Or rather, what's Catherine's?" He had no answer, just turned away. That night, for the first time, I slept in the guest room. The chasm between us was widening into a canyon. Subtle rumors began to circulate that R&D was a bottleneck, that Dr. Langley was too academic, not a team player, and resistant to the new business direction. I knew Catherine was the source her whispers amplified by Victoria. It was a classic campaign of destabilization, designed to make my eventual removal seem justified, even necessary. My emotional breaking point was approaching rapidly. The constant stress, the feeling of being gaslighted and undermined was taking its toll. I was exhausted, heartsick, and furious. To understand Catherine, I often thought about the scraps of information I'd gleaned about her own past. She'd come from a modest background, fighting for every scrap of success in a male-dominated business world. She'd once mentioned in a rare, unguarded moment over too much wine, a father who'd dismissed her ambitions, telling her to marry well and tend a home. This, I suspected, had forged her into the relentless, armor-plated woman she was. She equated compassion with weakness, collaboration with a lack of drive. She had to be the one in control always. Perhaps she saw in me a reflection of a part of herself she'd had to kill to survive, or perhaps she simply couldn't tolerate another strong woman in her orbit, especially one whose contributions rivaled her own in importance, albeit in a different field. Her ambition was a consuming fire, and she would burn anyone who stood in its way, even family. Especially family if they weren't aligned with her vision of power. Amidst this turmoil, the significance of my patents and my independent ownership of them became starkly clear. This was my new discovery, my lifeline. Marcus Harrison's long-ago advice echoed in my mind. Never assign your core IP. I hadn't. Despite Catherine's periodic attempts disguised as administrative housekeeping, the core patents underpinning Langley Innovations' entire product line, the bioadaptive polymers, the neural interface gel, the self-repairing biomaterial, were still firmly legally in my name, Emily Carter Langley. The company had licenses to use them, of course, licenses I had willingly granted when I believed we were all on the same team. But licenses could expire. Licenses could be revoked. A small, fierce spark of defiance began to glow within me. My internal transformation was beginning, shifting from wounded confusion to a cold, hard resolve. Allies and enemies were now starkly defined. Catherine and Victoria were the clear antagonists. Andrew was a disappointment, a casualty of his own weakness perhaps, but his inaction made him complicit. My R&D team remained my silent, anxious supporters. And Marcus Harrison, when I finally called him, his voice calm and steady on the other end of the line, became my general. "Emily," he said, after I'd poured out the whole sordid tale, "this is not just an employment issue. This is about your intellectual property. The patents are your leverage, potentially immense leverage." The stakes were sky high. My career, my reputation, the future of the company, and the impending IPO, all hung in the balance. The cliffhanger arrived on a Tuesday morning, as most calamities do, unannounced. Catherine summoned me to the main boardroom. The room was cold despite the Atlanta sun streaming through the panoramic windows overlooking Peachtree Street. Catherine sat at the head of the massive mahogany table flanked by Andrew and Victoria Hastings. Andrew wouldn't meet my eyes. Victoria had a small, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. "Emily, thank you for coming." Catherine began, her voice devoid of any warmth. "We've made a decision regarding the leadership of research and development." She paused, letting the silence stretch, a tactic she often used for dramatic effect. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew with a dreadful certainty what was coming. As we moved towards the IPO, Catherine continued, her gaze unwavering. "It is imperative that all departments are led by individuals with proven business acumen and a strategic, market-driven mindset. While your scientific contributions have been valuable," the word valuable was delivered with a slight dismissive inflection, "the board and I feel that R&D requires new leadership to align with our aggressive growth targets." She gestured towards Victoria. "Victoria Hastings will be assuming the role of head of research and development, effective immediately. Her background and her dynamic approach are precisely what Langley Innovations needs to navigate the next phase." The words hit me like a physical blow. Fired. Replaced by her. "Your role, Emily," Catherine said, her voice like ice, "is being eliminated. We thank you for your service. Andrew will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Andrew finally looked at me, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and something I couldn't decipher. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Silent. The room spun. This was it, the ultimate betrayal. Years of work of dedication dismissed in a 5-minute meeting. They thought they had won. They thought I would just disappear. Little did they know I had been documenting everything, and the real fight was just about to begin. The elevator ride down from the executive floor of Langley Innovations felt like a descent into a new, unwelcome reality. Andrew stood beside me, stiff and silent, the scent of his expensive cologne suddenly cloying. The usual cheerful hum of the office building sounded muted, distant, as if I were underwater. My personal belongings hastily packed into a single pathetic cardboard box felt like the sum total of a decade's worth of passion and intellectual labor. It was a lie, of course. My true worth wasn't in that box. It was in the very fabric of the company I'd just been ejected from. The major secret, the one they had so grossly underestimated, wasn't something I discovered in that moment, but rather its earth-shattering relevance crashed down on me with the force of a revelation. My patents. I owned them, not Langley Innovations. Me, Emily Carter Langley, the scientist they deemed unfit for real business. Years ago, guided by Marcus Harrison's sage advice, I had ensured that while Langley Innovations had licenses to use my patented technologies, the actual ownership, the intellectual property rights, remained unequivocally mine. Catherine, in her arrogance, had likely assumed these were mere technicalities, details that could be cleaned up by her lawyers eventually. She'd probably forgotten or never truly grasped the power that came with that ownership. As I sat in the sterile anonymity of a coffee shop on Peachtree Street, the Edison, a place I used to frequent for its quiet corners, perfect for scribbling research notes, the initial shock began to recede, replaced by a glacial calm. The betrayal still stung, a raw, open wound, especially Andrew's silent complicity. But Catherine's clinical dismissal, Victoria's smug anticipation, these ignited something else, a cold, hard fury. They hadn't just fired me. They'd tried to erase me to steal my legacy. My internal monologue was a whirlwind. How could they be so blatant, so stupid? Did they really think I'd just walk away, that my patents, were just part of the company furniture they could rearrange at will? The realization hit me like a freight train loaded with years of pain, yes, but also with an electrifying surge of power. This wasn't just an injustice. It was a colossal strategic blunder on their part. The game had changed. They thought they held all the cards. They were about to find out they were playing with a deck I had designed. I called Marcus Harrison immediately. His voice, calm and measured, was an anchor. "They did it, Marcus," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Catherine fired me. Victoria Hastings is my replacement." There was a brief silence. Then, "Okay, Emily. I'm not entirely surprised, given what you've told me. Are you all right?" "I'm processing," I admitted. "But mostly I'm angry, and I'm ready to fight. The patents, Marcus. They're all in my name. The core technologies." "I know," he said. "And the licenses have terms, Emily, including, if I recall, clauses about material changes in company structure or leadership directly impacting R&D without your consent, and crucially expiration dates that were set to be renegotiated, not automatically renewed." A slow smile spread across my face. "Exactly. Catherine is planning an IPO. Langley Innovations is about to launch a new product line for Q4, a line based entirely on my latest series of patents, the ones for the self-repairing biomaterials. "And when do those particular licenses come up for renewal, Emily?" Marcus asked, though I knew he probably had my files open in front of him. "In 3 months," I said, the words tasting like victory. "Right around the time they'll be deep in their IPO roadshow trying to convince investors their pipeline is robust and secure." "This isn't just leverage, Emily," Marcus said, a note of admiration in his voice. "This is a tactical nuke." The decision to take action wasn't a difficult one. It was an inevitability. The years of being undervalued, of seeing Andrew choose his mother's approval over partnership with me, of Catherine's relentless campaign to minimize my role. It all coalesced into a single point of unwavering resolve. They wanted a fight, they would get one. But I wouldn't fight them on their turf in the mud of corporate politics. I would fight them with the clean, undeniable power of the law and intellectual property. The planning and preparation phase began immediately. Marcus and I met at his Harrison and Associates law offices, a sleek modern space in Midtown that exuded quiet competence. We spent hours poring over patent documents, license agreements, company filings. We mapped out a strategy meticulous and multi-pronged. Phase 1. Secure my position. We sent a carefully worded, non-confrontational letter to Langley Innovations, simply acknowledging my termination and requesting information about severance and benefits, a standard procedure. This was to lull them into a false sense of security to make them believe I was a defeated employee, not a strategic opponent. Phase 2. Gather intelligence. I still had contacts within R&D loyal scientists who were appalled by my dismissal and Victoria's immediate ham-fisted attempts to assert authority. They became my discreet sources, providing updates on the new product launch schedule and the internal chaos Victoria was inadvertently creating. Phase 3. The waiting game. This was the hardest part. We had to let Catherine and Langley Innovations proceed with their IPO plans, let them invest millions in marketing. The new product line, let them get tantalizingly close to their goal. The closer they got, the more devastating our eventual move would be. During these months, I moved into a new apartment, a bright, airy space that was all mine. It symbolized my independence, a clean break from the life I'd shared with Andrew. He tried to reach out multiple calls, texts, filled with apologies and explanations. I didn't respond. The hurt was too deep, his betrayal too profound. There would be a time for that confrontation, but not yet. My internal monologue shifted from pure anger to a focused, almost serene determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every scientist, every innovator, every quiet contributor who had ever been exploited or undervalued. Catherine thought she had cut out the heart of her company and replaced it with a business-savvy upgrade. She was about to learn that the heart had a mind of its own and a memory. The anticipation for the confrontation was immense, a coiled spring within me. We weren't just going to disrupt their IPO. We were going to expose Catherine's duplicity, her arrogance. We were going to reclaim what was mine. The truth bomb was primed, the timer set, and as the date for the new product launch approached, as the buzz around Langley Innovations' IPO reached a fever pitch, I knew it was almost time to light the fuse. The world was about to see what a scientist who thinks she can run an enterprise was truly capable of. Behind their confident smiles and glossy IPO prospectuses, a darker truth was waiting to surface, and it was going to be spectacular. The day Langley Innovations chose for their grand unveiling of Novagena, the new product line based entirely on my self-repairing biomaterial patents, was a spectacle of corporate hubris. It was held at a swanky downtown Atlanta venue packed with investors, media, and industry figures. Catherine Langley, resplendent in a power-red suit, was set to deliver the keynote. Andrew, looking polished, but with a subtle tension around his eyes, was by her side. Victoria Hastings, radiating smug confidence, was schmoozing with potential investors, already behaving as if she were the queen of R&D. They were all blissfully unaware that their carefully constructed narrative was about to implode. The truth bomb wasn't dropped in that room, not initially. Marcus and I had decided on a more devastatingly public and legally sound approach. Precisely 1 hour before Catherine was due to take the stage as the pre-event champagne flowed and the buzz built, Marcus, on my behalf, issued a formal press release. Simultaneously, cease and desist letters, meticulously drafted and legally ironclad, were dispatched via courier and email to Catherine Langley, the Langley Innovations Board of Directors, their SEC counsel, and the lead underwriters of the IPO. The press release was concise and brutal. Dr. Emily Carter Langley, the original innovator and sole patent holder for the core technologies underpinning Langley Innovations' entire product portfolio, including the soon-to-be-announced Nova Gena line, wishes to inform the public and the investment community that Langley Innovations' licenses to utilize these patented technologies are set to expire in 60 days, despite Dr. Langley's attempts to negotiate fair and equitable renewal terms following her unjust dismissal from the company. No agreement has been reached. Langley Innovations currently lacks the legal right to manufacture, market, or sell products incorporating these technologies beyond the expiration date. Dr. Langley will vigorously defend her intellectual property rights. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Smartphones began buzzing throughout the venue. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters, sensing a massive story, started frantically typing on their laptops. Sarah Chen, a respected investigative journalist from the Wall Street Journal, whom Marcus had discreetly tipped off with non-attributable background, was already on the phone, her expression intent. On the small stage, Catherine, about to be introduced, was handed a tablet by a panicked aide. Her perfectly composed face visibly paled as she read. The microphone live picked up her sharp intake of breath. The room fell into an unnerving silence. Andrew, standing beside her, looked over her shoulder, his face crumpling in dawning horror. Victoria Hastings, mid-sentence, with an investor, froze as her own phone lit up. This was the first shockwave. Chaos erupted. The launch event was aborted before it even began. Catherine, usually so unflappable, looked utterly stunned, then furious. She was seen hissing into her phone, her face contorted. The Langley Innovations stock, which had been enjoying a pre-IPO surge in gray market trading, began to plummet in hypothetical value. The underwriters were apoplectic. The epic face-to-face confrontation came 3 days later at an emergency meeting of the Langley Innovations Board of Directors. Marcus and I were invited, or rather summoned. Catherine had probably hoped to intimidate me to force a settlement behind closed doors. She underestimated me again. The boardroom, the same one where I had been so callously dismissed, was now charged with an entirely different energy. The board members, a collection of venture capitalists, industry veterans, and independent directors, looked grim. Catherine sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of controlled fury. Andrew sat beside her, looking haggard and defeated. Victoria Hastings was also present, looking considerably less confident than she had a few days prior, nervously fidgeting with a pen. Dr. Langley. One of the lead directors, a stern-faced man named Arthur Kensington, began, his voice grave. "This is an extraordinary situation. Your press release has caused significant damage." "Mr. Kensington," I replied, my voice calm and clear, my gaze sweeping across the room before landing on Catherine. "The damage was initiated when Langley Innovations, under Mrs. Langley's leadership, decided it could build its future, its IPO, and its new product lines on intellectual property. It does not own and then fire the person who does. My patents are not a company asset to be disposed of along with inconvenient personnel." This was the first truth revelation moment for many in the room who hadn't grasped the full extent of my ownership. Catherine finally spoke, her voice dripping ice. "Emily, this is a shakedown, a vindictive attempt to derail this company because you were reassigned." "Reassigned?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Catherine, you fired me. You had Victoria Hastings installed in my office before my chair was cold. And it's not a shakedown, it's a legal notification. Your licenses expire. You have no right to use my technology after that date. The Nova Gena line dead on arrival without my consent." The shock on some board members' faces was palpable. They had clearly been misled about the security of their IP. Andrew suddenly spoke, his voice hoarse. "Mother Emily is right. Her patents. They are hers. We all knew this. You assured us it was handled." He looked at me, a deep, painful apology in his eyes. "Emily, I am so sorry. I should have stood up to her. I should have stood up for you." This was his moment, a painful public admission. Catherine shot him a look of pure venom. "Andrew, don't be a fool." Then came the second truth revelation, an unexpected ace up my sleeve. Marcus cleared his throat. Before this discussion proceeds further, he said, there's something else the board needs to be aware of. He gestured to his associate, who began distributing a set of documents. This is an affidavit along with supporting evidence, emails, internal memos, financial projections, provided by an informant from within Langley Innovations. All eyes turned to the documents. I saw Victoria Hastings flinch, her face paling dramatically. This evidence, Marcus continued, details a deliberate long-term plan orchestrated by Mrs. Catherine Langley to systematically discredit Dr. Emily Carter. Langley push her out of the company and secure control of her intellectual property, or what Mrs. Langley believed would become company property post-IPO, for a fraction of its worth. It outlines plans to dilute Dr. Langley's perceived importance to investors and to install Ms. Hastings as a more malleable head of R&D. The informant, of course, was Victoria Hastings, who, using the alias Margaret, had contacted me a week after my firing, fearing she'd be the scapegoat when the IP disaster inevitably blew up, or perhaps spurred by a late-blooming conscience, when she realized the depth of Catherine's fraud, she had decided to save herself. Her package included damning emails where Catherine explicitly discussed managing Emily out and neutralizing the patent issue before the IPO. One memo even detailed a strategy to lowball me on any potential future licensing, assuming I'd be too desperate or broken to fight. The reversal of power dynamics was absolute. Catherine, who had always commanded this room, sat stunned into silence, her face ashen. The board members were reading the documents with expressions ranging from shock to outright fury. Catherine, Arthur Kensington said, his voice dangerously low, is this true? Did you deliberately mislead this board, risk this entire IPO, and engage in what appears to be a fraudulent conspiracy to defraud Dr. Langley? Catherine attempted to rally. This is absurd. Fabrications Victoria is clearly a disgruntled employee. But Victoria, seeing her chance, spoke up, her voice trembling but firm. It's all true. I have more. I went along with it at first, but it became clear Mrs. Langley was willing to destroy Emily and risk the company to get what she wanted. I have recordings of her instructing me to create reports minimizing Dr. Langley's ongoing contributions. This was the final nail. The public humiliation of the antagonist was swift and brutal. The board members didn't need much more. Catherine's meticulously crafted image shattered before their eyes. She looked for the first time since I'd known her small and defeated. Her meltdown was not loud or hysterical, but a quiet, seething implosion. She stared blankly ahead as her empire crumbled around her. My moment of triumph was not one of gloating, but of quiet, firm vindication. I had spoken my truth, presented my facts, and the system for once had worked. The board went into a short closed session. When they emerged, Arthur Kensington made the announcement. The board of directors has voted unanimously to remove Mrs. Catherine Langley from her position as CEO and chairman of Langley Innovations effective immediately. Furthermore, we will be launching a full internal investigation into the matters raised today. Ms. Hastings, your employment is also terminated. Justice wasn't just served, it was a 5-course meal with dessert. The board then turned to me. Dr. Langley, Kensington said, we are in an untenable position. Langley Innovations' future is entirely dependent on your patents. We would like to open immediate good faith negotiations to secure long-term licensing and frankly to discuss how we can repair this egregious damage and perhaps find a new way forward with your guidance if you'd be willing. I looked at Marcus, who gave a slight nod. The game had just begun, but this battle I had unequivocally won. The truth didn't just set me free, it rebuilt me stronger. The boardroom felt strangely quiet after Catherine and Victoria were escorted out, a tangible vacuum left where Catherine's formidable presence used to dominate. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked, but also in some cases relieved. The elephant that had been crushing the company's integrity was finally gone. The immediate consequences were swift and far-reaching. Langley Innovations' IPO was, of course, indefinitely postponed. The stock that had been so eagerly anticipated was now toxic. The press, led by Sarah Chen's explosive Wall Street Journal expose detailing Innovation Deception's CEO ousted at Langley Innovations amid patent scandal, had a field day. The story went viral, a cautionary tale of corporate greed and a brilliant scientist who fought back. My name, Emily Carter Langley, was suddenly synonymous not just with groundbreaking science, but with courage and resilience. Carter Langley did not go quietly into the night. Her attempts at damage control were frantic and clumsy. Through her personal PR, she released a statement claiming she was the victim of a ruthless corporate coup and disgruntled former employees denying all wrongdoing. She even tried to reach out to me through mutual acquaintances, suggesting a private conversation to clear up misunderstandings. I declined. My response, relayed through Marcus, was firm. All communications were to go through legal counsel, and my terms for any future relationship with Langley Innovations would be non-negotiable and predicated on transparency and respect. The boundaries were drawn clear and unbreachable. Andrew was a different story. He was devastated, ashamed, and profoundly apologetic. He called me, his voice cracking. "Emily, I have no words. I failed you. I failed myself. I was a coward. I let her manipulate me, control me. There's no excuse." I listened, the anger I'd felt towards him now tinged with a weary sort of pity. "You made your choices, Andrew," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We both have to live with them." I wasn't ready to absolve him, nor was I ready to condemn him entirely. Our personal relationship was shattered, but his public admission in that boardroom had been a small, crucial step. He didn't try to defend his mother, didn't try to make excuses. He simply accepted his part in the debacle. He resigned from Langley Innovations the next day, stating he could no longer, in good conscience, be part of a company that had treated me so unjustly, even with his mother gone. It was a surprising move, one that signaled a genuine break from Catherine's influence. Support came from unexpected allies. Several of the board members reached out to me personally, expressing their admiration for my stand and their eagerness to rebuild the company on an ethical foundation. My former R&D team was, of course, ecstatic and fiercely loyal. They'd organized a small private celebration for me, a testament to the respect I'd earned. Even more surprisingly, Victoria Hastings, now Margaret, no more sent a short anonymous email. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. I hope to learn from my mistakes." It was a small gesture, but it hinted at a potential for redemption, even for her. The social media and community reactions were overwhelmingly in my favor. Hashtags like Innovator Emily, Her Patent Power, and How Langley Lies trended. Women in STEM in particular hailed me as an icon. The comment sections of news articles were filled with people sharing their own stories of being undervalued or exploited, finding a voice in my victory. If you've ever been the forgotten child or scientist, drop a comment and subscribe to Emily's Future. One popular comment read, humorously echoing a sentiment I felt deeply. In the short term, Langley Innovations was in turmoil. An interim CEO was appointed from the board. Their primary mandate salvaged the company by any means necessary, which meant one thing: making a deal with me. The power dynamic had completely inverted. I was no longer the supplicant scientist. I was the queen maker, the one holding all the valuable pieces. My emotional processing of the victory was complex. There was triumph, certainly a deep, satisfying sense of justice served. Karma didn't just come for them, it brought an entire army of consequences. But there was also a lingering sadness for the dream that had been Langley Innovations, the dream of collaborative creation that Catherine's greed had poisoned. And there was the pain of my broken marriage, the realization that the man I loved had not been strong enough when it mattered most. Yet overriding it all was a profound sense of empowerment. I had faced the dragon in its den and emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. I had found my voice, my strength, and I knew with absolute certainty that my future would be on my own terms. The Edison Cafe became my new thinking spot, not for hurried research notes, but for calm, strategic planning for what came next. The air in my new apartment seemed fresher, the view clearer. I was no longer just Dr. Emily Carter Langley, scientist. I was Emily Carter Langley, a force to be reckoned with. 2 years later, the Atlanta skyline gleamed under a bright afternoon sun, but I was looking at a different, equally impressive view. The sprawling campus of Thompson Medical, a global leader in healthcare innovation from my office. Not just any office, but one befitting my new role, Chief Innovation Officer, and a member of their board of directors. Life has its own way of getting even, and karma was already working not just for them, but for me. My transformed life was beyond what I could have imagined during those dark days. After Catherine's ousting, Langley Innovations, crippled and desperate, had approached me. Thompson Medical, a respected competitor, had also reached out, expressing immense interest in my patents and, more importantly, in me leading their advanced research division. The negotiations were intense. Marcus was a rock star. In the end, a unique solution emerged. Thompson Medical acquired the core assets of Langley Innovations, essentially my patents and the brilliant R&D team I had cultivated, in a deal that was structured more like a merger of my intellectual property into their robust framework. The Langley Innovations name, now irrevocably tainted, was quietly retired. My patents were not just secured, they were thriving, fueling a new generation of medical devices and therapies at Thompson Medical, backed by proper funding and a corporate culture that valued innovation and integrity. I was given unprecedented freedom, resources, and respect. My team from the old R&D department had come with me, loyal and energized by the new environment. We were doing the best work of our lives. I was recognized, celebrated, and most importantly, heard. And the antagonists. Their karma was indeed a 5-course meal served cold. Carter Langley faced multiple shareholder lawsuits and an SEC investigation that dragged on for over a year. While she avoided criminal charges due to clever lawyering, her reputation was in tatters. She was a pariah in the Atlanta business community she had once dominated. The Buckhead mansion was sold to cover legal fees and settlements. Her attempts to re-enter the business world were met with closed doors. Last I heard, she was living a quiet, significantly downsized life, the architect of her own spectacular downfall. What goes around doesn't just come around, it multiplies. Victoria Hastings, after her brief, disastrous tenure, disappeared from the corporate scene for a while. She eventually resurfaced in a mid-level marketing role at a much smaller, out-of-state company, her ambitions likely tempered by a harsh dose of reality. Andrew Langley took a much different path. His public apology and resignation had been the first steps on a long road to self-discovery. He spent time traveling, volunteering, and from what I heard through mutual acquaintances in therapy, he didn't try to re-enter the high-flying corporate world. Instead, he started a small nonprofit focused on ethical business practices and supporting STEM education. About a year after the dust settled, he reached out, not with excuses, but with a simple handwritten letter, expressing his continued remorse and his admiration for what I had accomplished. We weren't destined to be together. The damage had been too deep, but a measure of peace, a fragile thread of understanding began to form. Our divorce had been finalized amicably, without rancor. He was in his own way trying to make amends with the world and with himself. The family dynamics as they related to me were completely changed. I had no contact with Catherine, a boundary I maintained without regret. My relationship with Andrew evolved into a distant, respectful acquaintanceship. He would occasionally send notes congratulating me on new breakthroughs, always with a tone of genuine admiration. On the second anniversary of the upheaval, as I privately called it, a small, beautifully crafted wooden box arrived at my office. Inside was a meticulously carved bird wings outstretched taking flight. No note, but I knew it was from him. A symbolic acknowledgement of my freedom and success. I had built new relationships and support systems. My colleagues at Thompson Medical were not just co-workers, but friends. Marcus Harrison remained a trusted advisor and a good friend. I was dating again cautiously, but with a newfound clarity about what I wanted and deserved in a partner: honesty, strength of character, and a genuine respect for my passion. My professional and personal growth had been immense. I was no longer just a scientist. I was a leader, a strategist, a businesswoman in my own right. Ironically, everything Catherine had accused me of not being. I learned that my quiet diligence, when paired with an unshakable belief in my own worth and the courage to defend it, was more powerful than any amount of bluster or manipulation. Reflecting on the journey, the lessons were profound. Betrayal can be a catalyst for incredible transformation. True strength isn't about dominance, but resilience. And sometimes the greatest innovations are not in a lab, but in the reclaiming of one's own power and voice. In the end, the truth didn't just set me free, it rebuilt me stronger piece by painstaking piece into someone I was immensely proud to be. Peace wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of self-assured purpose. The view from my office wasn't just of a city, but of a future I had shaped with my own hands, my own mind, and my own unbreakable spirit. So that's my story, or at least a significant chapter of it. What started as a devastating betrayal ended up being the most profound liberation of my life. The moral of this story isn't just about patents and corporate showdowns. It's about recognizing your own value even when those closest to you, those you expect to champion you, fail to see it. It's about understanding that your voice matters, your contributions are significant, and you have the right to protect what is rightfully yours, be it an idea, a creation, or your own dignity. Have you ever felt like your hard work was invisible? Have you ever been underestimated? Or had someone try to take credit for your achievements? What would you have done in my shoes? I genuinely want to know. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or your own experiences. Let's build a community where we lift each other up and celebrate every victory, big or small. This journey taught me that sometimes the people you think are family can be the ones who hold you back the most, blinded by their own ambitions or insecurities. But it also taught me that true allies can emerge from unexpected places, and that standing up for yourself, even when your voice shakes, can change the entire trajectory of your life. Justice isn't always swift, and it's rarely easy, but fighting for it is always worth it. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of resilience and the sweet taste of karma finally catching up, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and definitely hit that subscribe button. I have so many more insights and perhaps a few more stories, though, hopefully less dramatic, to share about navigating complex dynamics, building a career on your own terms, and finding strength you never knew you possessed. Remember, your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. You are the innovator of your own life. Protect your intellectual property, and by that I mean your talents, your dreams, and your spirit. Thank you for listening. There's more to come.